The wagon wheels groaned as they dragged through the dry earth, each turn slower than the last, as if even the land itself resisted what was about to happen. She sat stiffly in the back, her hands clenched in her lap, fingers trembling, despite her effort to remain still. The journey had taken days, long, silent days filled with dust, heat, and the kind of thoughts that crept in when there was nothing left to distract you. This was supposed to be her second chance. That's what they had told her. A new life, a strong husband, a place where she would finally belong. But as the wagon crested the final ridge and the Apache settlement came into view, something inside her tightened instead of eased. It was quieter than she expected. No welcoming party, no signs of preparation, just scattered figures moving slowly between tents, their eyes lifting toward her arrival, not with warmth, but with something else, something colder. The driver cleared his throat, not meeting her gaze. "This is it," he muttered, already climbing down before the wagon had fully stopped. Her heartbeat quickened. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She had imagined someone waiting, a man stepping forward, claiming her, offering even the smallest sign that she had been expected. Instead, no one moved. She hesitated before climbing down, her boots hitting the ground with a soft thud that seemed far too loud in the silence. Dust swirled around her ankles as she straightened, clutching the small bundle that held everything she owned. A few members of the tribe had gathered now, their expressions unreadable. They spoke quietly among themselves in a language she didn't understand. Then one older man stepped forward. His face was lined with age, his posture strong despite it. His eyes studied her, not unkindly, but not welcoming either. "You came alone?" he asked in careful, broken English. She swallowed. I was sent here. For marriage." The words felt strange coming out now, thinner than they had sounded in her head for weeks. The man's brow furrowed. "To who?" Her breath caught. She reached into her bundle, pulling out the worn letter she had read 100 times on the journey. Her fingers shook as she handed it over. His name is written there," she said softly. The man took it, scanning the page. As he read, something shifted in his expression. Confusion. Then something heavier. He looked up slowly, meeting her eyes. A long silence followed. Behind him, the quiet murmurs among the others grew sharper, more urgent. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he folded the letter carefully and handed it back to her, his movements deliberate. Too deliberate. Then he said the words that would change everything. "You are not meant to be here." The world seemed to tilt. I don't understand," she stammered. "This is the place. I was told." "The man you were sent to," he paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "He is gone." Her stomach dropped. "Gone," she repeated faintly. The man nodded once. "Dead. 3 days." The bundle slipped slightly in her grip. 3 days. She had been traveling toward a future that no longer existed. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as if that alone could undo it. "There must be some mistake. I was told." "Yes," another voice cut in. She turned. A tall warrior stood a few steps away, his presence commanding, even in stillness. His expression was hard, unreadable, his eyes fixed on her, with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "A mistake," he said flatly. The word landed like a stone. The older man gestured toward her. "She was sent for him." The warrior's gaze didn't soften. "She was sent too late," he replied. The surrounding murmurs grew louder now, the tension thickening in the air. "What happens to her?" someone asked. No one answered. Her heart pounded as she looked between them, panic beginning to rise. "I can work," she said quickly, the words tumbling out. "I can cook, clean. I won't be a burden. Please." But even as she spoke, she could see it in their faces. She didn't belong here, not anymore. Maybe she never had. The warrior stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. For a moment she thought he might say something, anything that would anchor her in this place. Instead, his voice came low and certain. "You were delivered to the wrong Apache." Silence followed, heavy, final. Her throat tightened as the truth settled over her like a weight she couldn't escape. There would be no welcome, no husband, no place waiting for her. Just a mistake that had carried her across miles of unforgiving land, only to leave her standing here, alone among strangers. And for the first time since the journey began, she allowed herself to feel it fully. The fear, the uncertainty, the crushing realization that she had nowhere left to go. The wagon was already turning back. The sun had already begun its slow descent when she realized no one was coming to take her anywhere. The wagon that brought her here had disappeared over the ridge hours ago, leaving nothing behind but dust and silence. She had watched it go with a strange hope that someone might stop it, call her back, correct the mistake. But no voice had risen, no hand had lifted, only the empty sound of wheels fading into distance, like a door closing that could never be reopened. Now she stood at the edge of the Apache settlement, unsure where she was allowed to go, or even if she was allowed to stay at all. People passed by her without acknowledgement. Some glanced briefly, then looked away, as if she was something inconvenient their eyes had accidentally found. A mistake, that was the word they had used. It echoed inside her more than any sound around her. She finally moved when a woman carrying firewood walked past. She followed at a careful distance, hoping for direction, for anything that resembled acceptance. The woman didn't speak. She simply pointed toward a small, empty structure near the outer edge of the camp. A shelter. Not a home. Not really. Inside it was bare. A woven mat, a few worn blankets, nothing else. It felt like a place meant for forgetting rather than belonging. That night she sat alone and listened to the settlement settle into darkness. The wind carried unfamiliar sounds, low voices, distant laughter, the occasional bark of a dog, life continuing around her as if she were already gone from it. But she wasn't gone. She was just unwanted. Days began to pass like this. She learned quickly that no one would guide her. No one would explain anything. Survival here wasn't taught, it was observed, stolen in pieces from watching others. She carried water when she saw others doing it. She helped near the cooking fires when someone allowed her to stand close enough. She cleaned without being asked, careful not to disturb anything that didn't belong to her. And still, no one called her by name. Because no one had given her one here. She was simply the woman who came too late. The Apache warrior she was meant for never appeared. Not even in memory that anyone spoke aloud. Instead, whispers moved through the camp like smoke. He died before she arrived. She was meant for a dead man. A wasted journey. Each phrase struck differently, but all of them landed the same way, in her chest, where hope had once been. Then there was him, the other warrior, the one who had spoken to her on the day she arrived. He was different from the rest, not because he showed kindness, he did not, but because he showed nothing at all. No curiosity, no anger, no softness, only distance. He moved through the camp like a shadow that did not belong to any person, only to silence itself. She learned not to look at him directly, not because he demanded it, but because something in his presence made her feel as though she was intruding simply by existing. Still, she noticed him more than she wanted to. The way people stepped aside when he passed, the way even conversation lowered in volume when he was near. He was not just another warrior, he was something heavier, something unresolved. At night, she would sometimes hear him outside her shelter, footsteps in the dirt, then stillness, as if someone was standing there, deciding whether she should be removed entirely. She never looked out, not once. Food was left for her sometimes, not directly. She would find it placed near the entrance of her shelter, a piece of bread, a bowl of stew gone cold, a strip of dried meat. No note, no name, just existence acknowledged in the smallest, most distant way possible. She never knew who left it, but she suspected it wasn't kindness. It was tolerance. The kind given when people are unsure what else to do with something that does not belong. One afternoon, she heard raised voices near the center of the camp. She approached slowly, keeping her distance. A group had gathered. The same older man from the day she arrived stood at the front, speaking urgently to others. His voice carried frustration, maybe even concern, but she couldn't understand the words. Then she saw him, the warrior. He stood apart from the group, arms crossed, watching everything without reacting. Someone pointed in her direction. She stiffened instinctively. The older man turned slightly toward her, speaking again. This time, the tone felt heavier, final. The warrior finally looked at her. For the first time since she arrived, his gaze held something sharper than indifference. Not anger, not pity, something closer to judgment. And in that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. She was not just unwanted, she was unresolved, a problem no one had decided how to fix. That night, the wind grew colder. She wrapped herself in the thin blanket provided, but sleep did not come. Instead, she stared at the dark ceiling of the shelter, listening to the camp settle again into silence. And for the first time since arriving, she admitted something she had been avoiding even in her thoughts. If no one claimed her, if no one corrected this mistake, then she might remain here forever. Not as a guest, not as a wife, not even as a stranger, but as something in between all of them. Unseen, unchosen, unfinished. Outside, somewhere in the dark, footsteps passed her shelter once more. But this time, they did not stop. And she wondered if they ever would. The camp had a rhythm by now, one she was beginning to understand, even if she still didn't belong inside it. She knew when the fires were lit, when water was carried, when silence meant respect, and when silence meant rejection. And she knew, most of all, that no one looked at her for long, except one. The little girl. At first, she thought it was accidental, a child wandering too close, curious in the way children often are. The girl would stand near the edge of where she worked, watching without speaking, barefoot, quiet, always just out of reach. The woman tried to ignore her, not out of cruelty, but fear. Children made things complicated. They made you feel seen. And being seen here felt dangerous. But the girl kept coming back. Every day, same place, same silence, until it stopped feeling like coincidence. One afternoon, she was kneeling beside a small fire pit, stirring a thin pot of stew someone had allowed her to prepare. Her hands were steady now, more practiced than they had been when she first arrived. She heard the soft crunch of footsteps behind her. She didn't turn immediately. She already knew who it was. When she finally looked over her shoulder, the girl was standing there again, closer than before. This time, she wasn't just watching, she was holding something, a small piece of dried corn wrapped in cloth. The girl held it out, a gift. The woman hesitated, then accepted it gently. "Thank you," she said softly, unsure if the child understood her words. The girl didn't respond, but she didn't leave either. She just sat down a few feet away, as if she had decided she belonged there, with her. Days passed like that. The child came closer each time, first sitting nearby, then beside her, then silently helping, handing sticks, watching the fire, mimicking small tasks without instruction. The woman never asked her name, and the girl never offered it. It felt like a fragile truce between two lonely souls, one too young to understand rejection, the other too broken to expect acceptance. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was late afternoon. The light was soft, golden, spilling across the ground like melted copper. The camp was quiet, most people busy elsewhere. The woman was sitting outside her shelter, folding worn fabric into neat stacks. A simple task, repetitive, comforting. She didn't hear the girl approach, not until she felt a small presence beside her. When she looked up, the girl was closer than ever before, standing right in front of her, not watching this time, not hesitating, just looking directly into her eyes. The woman's breath caught slightly. Something about the moment felt different, heavier, like the air itself had paused. The girl's lips parted. At first, no sound came out. Just a small tremble in her expression, like she was fighting something inside herself. The woman set the fabric down slowly. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward. One small step, then another, until she was close enough that the woman could see the faint dust on her cheeks, the uneven braid in her hair. And then, the girl reached out. Her tiny hand touched the woman's sleeve, clutched it, like she was afraid it might disappear. The woman froze completely. The world around them seemed to narrow, the sounds of the camp fading into something distant and irrelevant. The girl's voice came out soft, broken, but clear enough to change everything. One word. "Ma, Ma." The woman blinked. Once, twice. Her heart stopped in a way she didn't understand. "Mama?" she whispered back instinctively, unsure if she had heard correctly. The girl's grip tightened. Tears formed in her eyes, sudden and overwhelming, as if saying the word had opened something she had kept locked inside her for a long time. She repeated it again. "Mama." This time stronger, certain. The woman's breath shook. "No, I'm not," she began, but her voice faltered, because something inside her broke at the same time it tried to heal. The girl leaned forward, pressing her forehead lightly against her hand, like she had finally found something she had been searching for without knowing it. The woman didn't move. She didn't know how. Disbelief, and something dangerously close to grief, because she understood what this meant. Not the word itself, but the need behind it, the emptiness behind it, the loss that had created it. A sound behind them made her turn slightly. Not fully, but enough. A shadow stood at a distance. The warrior. He had seen it. The moment. The word. Everything. He didn't speak, didn't move closer, but something in his stillness shifted, as if the ground beneath him had changed without warning. The woman looked back at the girl, who was still holding on to her hand, as if it were the only solid thing left in the world. And for the first time since arriving in this place, she didn't feel like a mistake. She felt like something else entirely, something she had never been allowed to be before. The word still hung in the air. Mama. It didn't fade the way sound normally did. It stayed, pressed into the silence between the woman and the little girl, like something alive, something fragile that could either grow or be destroyed in a single moment. The woman slowly lowered her hand, still feeling the warmth of the child's grip even after she loosened it. She didn't know what to say. Nothing in her life had prepared her for that moment. Not the journey, not the warnings, not even the loneliness that had followed her here like a shadow. Because loneliness was one thing, but being chosen, being called Mama, was something entirely different. Something she wasn't sure she was allowed to hold. Behind them, footsteps approached. Slow, controlled, heavy enough to be felt before they were heard. The woman didn't need to turn to know who it was. The little girl did, though. She stiffened slightly, but did not let go of the woman's sleeve. The warrior stopped a few steps away. His presence changed the air immediately, like a storm deciding whether to break or pass. His eyes moved from the girl to the woman, and finally to the hand still clinging to her sleeve. For a long moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched until it felt like something had to crack. Then his voice came, low, controlled, but sharp enough to cut through everything between them. "Come here." The girl hesitated, not because she didn't hear him, but because she didn't move right away. Her grip tightened instead. The woman instinctively placed a hand over the girl's small fingers, not pulling her away, but not letting go either. The warrior's gaze narrowed slightly. "Now," he said again. The girl flinched at the tone and finally stepped back, but slowly, unwillingly, as if leaving the woman physically hurt. She stopped at the warrior's side, but even then, she didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the woman. The warrior followed her gaze, and something in his expression hardened, not with anger, but with something more dangerous. Understanding. "You are not her mother," he said flatly. The words landed between them like stone. The woman felt it immediately, the shift, the correction, the boundary being drawn back into place. She lowered her eyes. "I didn't tell her to call me that. She said it." Her voice was steady, but inside, she felt something tighten. Because part of her had wanted it to be real. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel what it meant to be chosen. The warrior didn't respond right away. His hand rested lightly on the girl's shoulder, but not comfortingly, more like restraint. "She does not speak," he said finally. The woman looked up. That made no sense. "She just did," she whispered. His jaw tightened slightly. "She did not speak for months," he corrected, "since her mother died." The words struck differently this time, not as information, but as weight, loss given shape. The woman looked at the girl again, really looked. The child wasn't crying now, but her face was tight, conflicted, like something inside her had been pulled open too quickly. And yet she still stood there, still looking at the woman, still refusing to let go completely. The warrior stepped forward, between them, not aggressively, but decisively. "You do not understand what this means," he said. The woman swallowed. "I think I do," she replied softly. "More than you think." A flicker passed through his eyes at that, but it vanished quickly. He shook his head once. "No," he said. "You don't." The girl tugged slightly at his hand, not to leave, but to resist. A small, desperate movement that didn't go unnoticed. The warrior looked down at her, and for the first time, something like strain showed in his face. "You will confuse her," he said to the woman. "I didn't ask for this," she replied quickly, her voice trembling now despite her effort to stay steady. "She came to me." "That is the problem," he said. Silence followed, heavy again, final again. The girl suddenly stepped forward, between them, small, barefoot, defiant in the only way she knew how. She grabbed the woman's hand again, tighter this time, like she was afraid it would be taken away. The warrior froze. The woman froze too. Because the message was clear now. Not spoken, but undeniable. The child had already chosen, and no command, no rule, no correction was strong enough to undo it easily. The warrior's eyes moved slowly from the girl's hand to the woman's face. And in that silence, something shifted. Not acceptance, not yet, but something far more complicated. A problem had become real, and now it could no longer be ignored. That night, the camp felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just heavier. Like something unseen had shifted its place, and no one yet knew what it meant. The woman stayed inside her shelter longer than usual, though sleep refused to come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same thing. The girl's face, the word, Mama. It should have felt like comfort. Instead, it felt like responsibility. Like something fragile had been placed in her hands without warning, and she had no idea how to hold it without breaking it. A knock came at her shelter long after darkness had settled. Not loud, not demanding, just present. She hesitated before opening the door. Outside stood one of the older women from the camp, the same one who rarely spoke to her. Her expression was different tonight, less distant, more serious. She said nothing at first, then simply gestured. "Come." The woman followed. They walked quietly through the settlement, passing firelight and shadows. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of smoke and earth. Eventually, They stopped near a larger tent at the edge of the camp. The warrior's tent. Light flickered inside. Voices were low. The older woman stopped and stepped aside, silently indicating she should enter. The woman hesitated, but then she heard it. A small sound, a child's breathing, so she stepped inside. The warrior was there, standing near the fire, but he wasn't alone. The little girl sat on a blanket nearby, holding something in her hands, a small carved object. She looked calmer than before, but her eyes were tired, like something inside her had been stirred too deeply. When she saw the woman, she didn't speak, but she leaned forward slightly. A silent recognition. The warrior noticed immediately. His gaze shifted between them, and then he spoke. "This is why you are here." The woman frowned slightly. "I don't understand." He exhaled slowly, as if the words weighed more than he wanted them to. "Her mother died in the winter raid," he said. "She did not speak after that." The fire cracked softly. The girl didn't move. The warrior continued. "She refused food, refused people, even me." The woman's chest tightened slightly at that. Then his voice lowered. "Until you arrived." Silence followed. Heavy, real. The woman looked at the girl. The child was watching her again. Not fearful, not uncertain, but holding on with her eyes, the same way she had held her hand earlier. The warrior stepped closer to the fire. "She does not understand why," he said, "but she chose you because you were the first person who did not turn away." The woman blinked slowly. "That's not enough reason to call me," she began, but stopped, because the words still mattered. "Mama." The warrior looked at her sharply. "It is not a title," he said. "It is a wound speaking." That silenced her. The girl suddenly stood, slowly, carefully, and walked toward the woman again. The warrior did not stop her this time. She reached the woman and pressed her small hands against her waist, holding on like she had done before. But now it felt different, stronger, more certain. The woman knelt down slightly to meet her level. "What do you need from me?" she whispered. The girl hesitated. Then, softly, "Stay." Just one word, but it carried everything. Loss, fear, hope. The warrior turned his face slightly away, as if the moment was something too private to witness fully. But he did not leave. Later, when the girl finally fell asleep on the blanket, the woman remained sitting beside her. The fire dimmed, shadows stretched, and the warrior spoke again, quieter this time. "She is attaching to what remains," he said. The woman didn't look at him. "Or maybe," she replied softly, "she's learning how to live again." That made him pause, longer than before. Outside the tent, the wind moved through the camp. Inside, something unspoken had begun to form. Not acceptance, not yet, but recognition, that the girl had not chosen randomly, and neither, perhaps, had the world. Morning came quietly. No announcement, no ceremony, no sudden change that would make it obvious something in the camp had shifted. And yet, everything felt different. The woman noticed it first in the small things. People didn't step away quite as quickly when she passed. The silence around her wasn't as sharp. It was still there, but softened, like a blade that had finally been set down. She didn't know what had caused it, but she had a feeling. It had started the night before. The little girl woke before sunrise. For the first time in days, she didn't immediately reach for the woman in panic, or search the room with frightened eyes. Instead, she simply looked at her, as if checking something, as if making sure she was still there. Then, without hesitation, she moved closer and rested her head against the woman's arm. No word, no demand, just presence. The woman gently placed her hand over the child's hair, and this time she didn't pull away from the feeling. Outside, the warrior stood near the edge of the camp, watching. He had not spoken much since the night before, but something in him had shifted too. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough that those around him noticed without discussing it. A decision had not been announced, but it had been made. Later that morning the woman was called again. Not by force, not by command, but by presence. She followed the same path as before, but this time the air felt less like judgment and more like expectation. When she entered the open space near the fire, she saw the warrior waiting, and the child, standing between them. The girl looked at both of them as if she was holding something fragile in her hands, something she didn't want to drop. His voice was steady, but no longer cold. "She does not stop choosing you," he said. The woman looked down slightly. "I never asked her to," she replied quietly. "I know," he said. That silence carried more weight than anything before it. The girl stepped forward, grabbing the woman's hand again, then the warrior's hand, hesitantly at first, then firmly, pulling them slightly closer together, as if trying to connect something that had been separated for too long. The woman looked at him, really looked, not at the warrior the camp respected, not at the man who had judged her arrival, but at the person standing in front of her now, tired, guarded, and slowly letting something inside him loosen. "She needs more than survival," she said softly. He didn't argue, for once. A long pause followed. The wind moved through the camp. The fire cracked. The girl held both their hands tighter. And then the warrior spoke again. Not as a command, not as a judgment, but as a choice. "She stays," he said simply. The woman's breath caught slightly. He continued. "Not as a mistake, not as a guest." His eyes met hers, as family. The word landed carefully, not loudly, but completely. The girl smiled for the first time since the woman had arrived. Small, but real, and without hesitation, she pressed herself between them, still holding both hands, like she had finally finished something important. The woman knelt slowly, and wrapped an arm around her. Not unsure anymore, not afraid of what it meant. The warrior watched for a moment longer, then slowly, carefully, he placed his hand over both of them, not as a barrier, but as part of them. That evening, the camp no longer whispered about a mistake. They didn't need to, because something had become clear without words. She had not been delivered to the wrong Apache. She had been delivered to the one place where a broken child still had a voice, and where a woman who had nowhere to belong was finally called something she never expected to hear. Not unwanted, not forgotten, but home.